Today we're going to be looking at the Bobcat E19. This is a 2020 version. It's not the complete full spec one, it doesn't have the proportional rollers, but it's a fairly high spec 1.5 ton class excavator. And we'll have a look at some of the details and features that these machines that really are pushing 2 tons now, but they do offer a bit more performance than the lower spec kind of 1.5 or 1.6 options that most manufacturers will make. They'll make 3 models in this range. The E19 for Bobcat, similar to Kubota's 019, JCB's 19C, Cat's 302. They're all at this kind of 2 ton, just under 2 ton mark, and really are going for the maximum performance out of a 1.5 ton excavator. So the Bobcat is really, they've gone for that performance in a tight package kind of theory, and having had a play with it, I can say that it does a real good job of it, really. The E19 is powered by a Kubota engine. It's slightly less powerful, oddly enough, than the same Kubota engine that's in Kubota's 019. It's just over 10 kilowatts as opposed to 11 in the Kubota, but it puts out more auxiliary hydraulic flow at 30 litres a minute, and seems to have some advantages that may be of use to you, and others that may not. This machine spec with a longer dipper, for example, that might be really handy in some situations, but obviously does come with obvious disadvantages of load over heights and kind of performance when pushing material away from you particularly, but its advantages will no doubt for some people outweigh the disadvantages of that. So they've got a lot of spec options on these E19s, and you can spec extra lines down the dipper, rollers on the joysticks, and quite a lot of other features actually. Obviously cab or canopy. They have got a decent options list, and that makes them quite customizable, and as a result they're a good or a machine that's often used by ARB guys, because you can stick a rotator grab on them, and obviously contractors, landscapers and ground workers alike in different specs. The E19 has got the piston pump and a gear. I think it's got 2 pistons and a gear pump, which is much better than the 2 models below this, which look very, very similar to the layperson, but are actually this machine will outperform them all day long with its better pump and more performance generally, and of course extra weight, which all helps anchor it to the ground. I think the basic model, for example, the E15, doesn't have expanding tracks, which the bigger machines do, and that's a big advantage really on these. Gone are the days of driving machines without expanding tracks at this size, because they are quite unstable, especially for people who hire them and don't understand where you can take these machines. So having a look around it, it's got some quite nice little details really. Nice big door for the cab. They've kind of reduced the overall counter sort of tail swing here. It is obviously a conventional machine, but it doesn't stick out a huge amount. They've gone with the deeper floor option, which gets a lot of gear away under the floor, and kind of makes the whole machine more compact. However, it does leave a little bit of a tight margin here between the top of the tracks and the actual skirt of the machine, which I think is a bit of a disadvantage of this machine really. You'd have to be a bit careful if you had a load of mud. You wouldn't want too much crap building up there, because you'd be scratching the skirt of your machine. The king post in particular, when it swings around, comes very, very close to this, so something that's worth noting. But I understand why they've done it. It's a compromise on all these things. Nice tie down points in all 4 corners of the machine actually, which are really nice to see. So if you've got internal tie down points in your trailer, you've got something firm you can stick it down to, which is nice. They've grouped some of the difficult greasing nipples here, so you don't have to go hunting for them, and they've got stickers with hours, how many times you do it, which is a nice little feature. But otherwise the greasing on this machine's quite old school actually. It's just normal pin, normal eyes on each pin. Some of them are obviously easier to find than others. It would have been nice to see pin end greasing, so you can just go down one end of the machine, one side and kind of grease everything, but it's by no means something that would put me off buying it. It's just something to note, really. As I say, it has the long arm, which I'll show against my JCB 8015 in a minute, with its sort of standard length arm. It does give it incredible reach at ground level, but actually doesn't allow it to dig particularly deep, or deeper than the JCB does. It goes down to about 2.5 meters, which is good for a little digger like this. And if you're in someone's house, you're doing foundations, you know, you go much over 2.5 meters, and you're going to struggle to get a trench footing anyway in a lot of ground like that. So you know, it will pack a decent punch, but you'd think that longer arm would get it down to nearer 3. It actually doesn't. It's obviously, it loses the geometry as it goes down, and I assume it's probably because the boom cylinder is on the back end of the boom instead of the front. It makes it much more protected, of course, for smacking skips and things, which people do with this kind of machine. And this one, even, look, it's 200 hours and it's had a bit of abuse there. It's a lot more protected there, and you do gain, of course, a bit of digging force because it's extending itself against the ground instead of pulling to kind of dig. But you lose a bit of lift capacity, and you also lose, well, obviously a bit of dig depth, I guess, with that design. You know, with the long dipper, you just thought it would dig deeper. Otherwise, this one's only got 2 or 1 single flow and return to the end, but you can get 4 pipes. Nice to see these ones actually extended down to the arm. Some of them are finished up here, and I've seen some of the ARB guys with these rotator grabs that are all plumbed up at the top, and there's hoses hanging down, and yeah, it's nice that you also can get a kit that extends them out, and this machine has that. Pipework and everything's quite tidy. It's all lagged in this like nylon sheathing, which is a nice touch. The Kubotas and things have got this plastic sheathing, which is just naff, really, and it goes a discoloured colour after a couple of years, and I just think it's a bit of a shame, really. It could have been done better. This stuff's quite good, and it won't, obviously it's there really for burst protection, but it does offer a little bit of protection as well for your hose. This one's come with the White's hitch and White's buckets. I've said not really my favourite type of hitch, really, but they're spec'd on a lot of these kind of machines. I just think all of this, you know, could have been done a bit better. Is that meant to be like that? It just looks a bit out of place to me. Just a random bolt, but anyway, that's White's stuff, really. Yeah, and the bucket play isn't too bad. I think they run a wider yoke than the Kubotas. I've had some Kubotas with sub 200 hours, and the play in the bucket's terrible with those White's hitches. But is it the hitch? Is it the size of the yoke and, you know, pin width? I don't know, but this one's all right, and it's got a nice geometry on it as well, so you can open the bucket crowd right out, and you know, and when you just curl it back in as well, it'll, you know, sort of hold material right up if you were kind of loading into something. As I say, it has got a long arm, which you can spec a shorter arm for it if that's your thing. But this one does have the long arm. This side is all pretty clean, really. It's got the light on the offside, which is in this nice little metal cage which protects it. King post, I've said, is pretty easy to get to and grease. The hoses are nicely routed through, but does come quite close when it swings over the tracks, so worth noting. Blade design's quite good. Obviously these are tucked out the way at the moment for a bit of storage, but you know, there's a nice big opening here for material to fall through, and it's only really because I've got the blades closed that we're getting a bit of crap on them. Otherwise, you know, the gear will fall nicely through there, which is a nice touch to see. It won't sort of build up too much. It does extend though quite a long way past the end of the machine, so even when it's behind you with the counterweight, it sticks past that. So if you're in some tight spots, you would have to probably want the blade in front of you, because if it's behind you, you wouldn't see it, and if you turn, the blade will catch the outside of a wall or whatever you might be up against. Some machines have got them, they're quite tight, nice tight in, and when the counterweight's over them, they're sort of tucked underneath. But this one is, you know, it has its advantages. You can clean up nicely against it with the long arm, but it's just worth noting for that. This side of the machine's quite straightforward, really. There's not a lot particularly to say, apart from the good old diesel filler is impossible to get a jerry can to. I've got no idea why these manufacturers want to do this, but please give us something that we can actually get a jerry can to this. Not everyone fills up from a Bowser, especially for a small machine like this. You know, it's hired. People have little jerry cans. They don't have a Bowser, really. The track frame on it is actually, and we'll see when you compare it to my 8015, it's longer than a standard, or certainly my 8015. It's probably a good 6 inches longer, and obviously steps out quite a bit wider as well, which that really does help with the stability. And this machine is, even with the long arm and a full bucket of clay, I think pretty stable. And then we're around the back really, which is fairly nice and simple. Another 2 tie down points, which are obviously under here, and you've got your expanding undercarriage under here, which you just have to be a bit careful, I think, when you retract, that you don't get any bricks or anything caught on those hoses as they come in. But you know, that's a small price to pay for the advantage of having the expanding undercarriage, really. The engine bay, this is the real trick bit of this machine, I think. It all opens up here, and you get this door which opens nice and wide. It's got a grease gun holder, which I think is a really nice touch, and a nice diagram of, you know, what needs greasing every so many hours, etc. And there's your little Kubota engine. Hydraulic filter, fuel, it's all there to see really. Oil filters down there, nice and easy to get to, and I think service access generally on this machine is actually very good. You know, the little piece de resistance, such as this panel here, opens up as well, so you can get right the way around the side of the machine. And even in here, it's got some nifty little features. This radiator is actually all one piece, so you've got the oil cooler to the side, and then this is the main rad, all aluminium as well, by the way. I wouldn't want to replace that, but what it means is there's no twin rad to get stuff stuck between. You know, a lot of issues with machines overheating a few years in is dust and particles and stuff, leaves get stuck between the 2 radiators, and they never get cleaned out and they overheat. And having one rad like this is going to vastly reduce that problem. And if it does get a bit clogged up with some dust, it's going to be a lot easier to clean out as well. So I think that's a really nice feature of this digger. They've obviously sort of thought about these kind of things. Batteries there. Unfortunately, the diesel was no easier to get to because the screen wash bottle's in the way, even like that. But the isolator's nicely hidden away, so you know, for those of us who don't take it out every day, it's not just left on the side of the machine for someone to play with. It's hidden away and can be locked up, which is a nice little feature. I do wonder, with all these electronics under the dash here being right here and exposed, whether that would actually make it easy enough to bypass the key code sort of start that this thing has. It doesn't actually have a key, it's just a code. I don't know, I'm sure they've thought about it, but you do think, you know, good access sometimes isn't always an advantage, is it? Because it's good access for servicing, but it's also good access for thieves to potentially get hold of. But I think that whole thing, this whole machine's opening up like this, is a really good concept, and there isn't a lot you can't get to there. It wouldn't surprise me as well. I think the cabs may tilt forward on these, and I mean, you'd get to everything under the floor then. There wouldn't be a lot left you couldn't touch, really. So I think Bobcat have done very well here in what they've done with with this service access. Let's close this up. So that just pops in there and seems a bit flimsy, but when the second door comes round, it is a lot easier. That up, and that all doesn't rattle around then. So yeah, I like that design a lot. I think it's a good feature of this particular machine. So I thought I'd line these 2 machines up to compare against each other. Obviously the 801 is a lot older, being a 2001 model, you know, early 2000s machine, and this E19 obviously is a 2020 model. So it's surprising how far these 1.5 tonners have come, actually, when you look at the, you know, quite a few bits on them. Really, we'll go through now. One thing, this Bobcat, as I've said, is a long reach. So it's got the long reach, it's got the long dipper, which is a fairly standard spec in the UK. You can spec them with a shorter arm, which I guess would make it more comparable with the 801 behind it. But you can see how much further we've got reach here. I mean, I'd say that's another good bucket's length on top at ground level. which is significant. It'll have its issues when loading dumpers and stuff, and I'll explain that later, but because you've reached sort of load over height. But at ground level, that's got to be not far off of sort of 3-ton machine reach in a 1.5 ton compact footprint. So it has its uses, and that will certainly be a benefit to some people. Looking at the specs though, it can only dig as far down as the 801 behind it anyway, so I guess this arm is a lot flatter. Difficult to see in profile on the camera, but got a much flatter profile here, and the arm, they've obviously hidden the cylinder on top, which is great, but what that's meant is it runs out of extension, I guess, when it's going down further. So it's gaining with the long arm kind of more reach at ground level, but less when you go down. So it's not all about how long your dipper is, guys. It's what you want to do with it, as we all know. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. You compare the track frame, they're both in line with each other here. This obviously has a much longer dozer, which clears the back end of the machine quite a lot better. But that's because the whole structure really is a lot lower, as I've said before. So that's one of the reasons. The track frame is actually longer, so you can see here the 801 finishes probably not hugely difficult, as I said, to see on the camera, but I'd say there's got probably another 4 inches in the track frame length, because I did try and line them up right at the front. Maybe even the Bobcat's a slight forward, so maybe there's even 6 inches of a sort of longer track, which enough make it a lot more stable, and you haven't actually gained, of course, really much more footprint. If you look at the back end of these machines, the 801 is slightly longer than the Bobcat really, so you've got a reduced tail. Fronts very, very similar when compared with the tracks lined up. I think they're pretty much in line. King posts are very similar, so the front end of them is good. The back end of the Bobcat is a lot more compact, but then it's a much taller machine as far as its depth here. You look at the look at these two in profile. This is one of my concerns with this machine, is it's very, very tight to the tracks. You get mud build up, bit of crap, bit of concrete gets on here or something, you will be hitting this skirt, which I guess it's a compromise. You've got to fit it in somewhere. You either got to have a thicker floor, less back end. The 801's obviously a much older design, but it has got a bit more clearance here, and particularly when it comes to the king post, which you can see here is very, very close, and when it's on the tracks it's almost hitting the, it's not far off hitting the rubber really. The 801 is similar, but it has a bit more clearance, and whatever, it's a compromise, as all these things are. Having the ram above is a much better design overall and things, but yeah, that's the two compared. They're both 1 metre wide. When the tracks are in on the Bobcat, do extend nice and wide, and the Bobcat's a bit taller as well, so things have got a bit fatter, a bit taller on these machines really. That's the two compared. Probably should have compared an older Bobcat or something, but we don't own one of them, so at least it gives you an idea of what it's like against a sort of standard type machine. A lot of the more basic specs, the KX 015s and other similar comparable excavators are all similar really to these older minis, 1.5 tonners. These modern ones have got the same much better pumps and things, which all helps improve their performance, but still do a good day's digging with that old digger over there, and it's only appreciating in value as well through the old COVID, so no bad thing, can't complain. When it comes to the cab, I think we've got a nice wide opening on the cab door, which is nice and easy to get hold of. There's a couple of decent handles, and the track, when they're expanded, acts as a nice step as well in, so it's quite a nice place to be really, and it's real good visibility once you're inside. Hopping in, you've got a couple of sets of track pedals on the floor, which are actually very usable in this machine, which is nice to see on a little digger. Quite simple kind of foot rocker operated for the auxiliary, which in this is 2-way, and obviously for the offset on that side. Heater and box all there, and you can point at the windscreen and demist things. It's quite an efficient and out the way little piece. This one has a fixed seat, which is a little bit low. I think if it had the suspension seat, it would just bump you up a little bit more and make the driving position a bit more comfortable. I find the levers a little bit high, but I was honestly just because it's just got the fixed seat option. If you're buying one, you'd put a suspension seat in it, wouldn't you? So that wouldn't be an issue. But it is a nice high back seat, which is quite a nice little feature of it, really. Here's the keypad for starting it. Real simple to operate, but no keys. A bit odd. You just sort of use this as your starter and input your code and off you go. A couple of little pockets for storage. Not really sure what this one's for. You get a lighter and a few fags in there. Very simple sort of dashboard. Gives you your engine heat and a bit of fuel. Actually has a cup holder, which as we know is a big win in these machines. And there's good storage space around the back here. You know, you can definitely stick a lunchbox and at least you know, have a sort of day's work in here and a bit of room. Both windows open really nicely and right up, so also I like that. You know, it does get warm in the summer. You can get good ventilation. It's really airy. You've got this lovely window overhead, decent view out the front. You can see down both sides of the arm, and all around. You know, there's no need for any mirrors on this machine. You can see pretty much to all corners. Lovely big window down here as well, and even with the door shut, which you can do here. You know, you've got a decent bit of glass down there as well. It's a nice cab and a nice finish, really. The only thing, as I said, is it's a little bit low when I'm sat here, you know, on the controls, but otherwise very clever. What they've done is very similar to the Volvo, really. They've gone with this flat floor, and it gives you so much more leg room because you can get your feet right to the end of the window, or no window obviously. This one's been fitted with aircon thanks to the previous hirer, at 200 hours old. But yeah, so you can get your feet right to the end, and that's quite clever because it makes it feel like there's absolutely tons of room when there probably isn't that much more if you measured it with a tape measure than other machines. But it just allows you can use them foot pedals and, you know, spend a day in here, and even as a larger operator, I'm over 6 foot, it doesn't really feel too bad. Nice levers. Everything else is to hand. It's obviously got a couple of lights on it, and not a lot of other features really. But yeah, I quite like the cab on this. I think it's a real bonus and sort of plus point on this machine. And yeah, we'll go and see how it drives. So we've got the Bobcat on a getting stuff thrown in the window. We've got the Bobcat on a bit of a stockpile to give it a test, because obviously it's not been hired by me for a job. It's actually a friend's hired it, and that's a full bucket of fairly wet gear. The tracks are expanded, and yeah, you can lift the back end if you shake it around, but I mean, I'd say it handles it pretty well, really, considering it's got that long dipper, and that is a full graded bucket of crap. So stability, I think, is pretty good, really. It climbed up this stockpile okay. It's one thing my friend said to me, he's not so sure about, you know, the kind of the tracking ability of this machine. And I mean, I see what he means. Maybe when you're tracking around and you're not quite, you know, you're trying to turn like a small corner, and you're not like just stopping and doing a dead turn. You know, you're kind of trying to just ease it round a long radius. It is a little bit, even in you know, not in fast track, even normal tracking, it's a bit kind of reluctant to flow share, I think, between the two tracks. But it does it, but it's not quite as positive as some other machines. I think it grades quite well. You'd think that with this long arm, you know, you wouldn't be able to grade very well with it, but I'm not having too many problems here. The controls are quite heavy, but I quite like that actually. They're quite you know, sort of firm to operate in that way. And you do get a tremendous amount of reach with this long dipper. So it's actually driving, you know, quite well. Okay, I'm not actually doing a job with it, but I certainly don't have any complaints really about the way it drives. You have to take into account the limitations of the fact that it is a 1.5 ton machine, or
flow sharing when you're trying to track around is not amazing. You know, it doesn't want to lift the boom, look, or do too much really, other than, you know, gravity fed when you're tracking, and that's just in normal track mode, not in quick track. So that's a disadvantage of it. The other disadvantage of this long dipper really is that it doesn't like pushing away from itself. You'd have thought, you know, a normal machine would push that kind of muck away. So because of the geometry of it, I guess a lot of leverage there, and it doesn't like when it's up close to itself pushing away. Not too bad when it's further away. You know, it's got a bit more, I guess, you know, leverage effort on it, so it drives quite well there. But just when you're up close, you've got a bit of gear right near you and you want to push it away, it's a bit reluctant to do that. But that is a factor of having the long arm really. Otherwise, the track pedals are very usable. You know, you could use them all day long, absolutely no problem at all. It seems to have plenty of digging power. Haven't really struggled with any of that. You can do a bit of tracking about and digging, but it's not really what it's for. This is a machine, you know, you want the most from something. You can't tow 3.5 ton. Maybe you've got a van or something. You know, this is a very good sort of compromise machine really to get a decent bit of reach and get in nice tight spaces with the tracks, you know, done up. And it is driving, you know, it's driving pretty well. You do have to give it a bit of revs. It's you knock the revs right back down. It doesn't really want to do too much at tick over. I know the other one I drove, actually another friend of mine actually owns one of these, and he was saying that it really doesn't like, it won't slew, I think, his one on tick over, which this one will, strangely enough. But yeah, his one, you know, you push the lever and it would like it do absolutely nothing. It's actually working okay, so maybe that was just a thing on his machine. The cab is quite a nice place to be. As I said when I went through the cab, it's the seat could do a bit higher, as I said, but otherwise it's actually a really nice place to be. There's loads of visibility, and it's quite a nice place to spend a shift really. The offset on this I think is pretty good as well. I'll probably give it a bit more revs for that. Oh, attacking the cab. So you can get it, I mean, right round to, that has got to be 90 degrees really. You know, that's very good in that direction. And in the other direction, come on, show me about flow sharing. You get 45, probably 50 degrees off there, which isn't bad, but if you've got 90 degrees in one direction, you can set yourself up well. So the offset on it's really good, and I think you can dig in a fairly tight space with that. These machines are a compromise, aren't they? You want something 1.5 ton size because of space, and then this thing's obviously got the extra reach, but it doesn't quite have the performance of what I would call a proper 2 or 2.5 ton machine. You know, the other ones we've looked at, you know, whether that be the Volvo or Yanmar or my JCB, which again is another ton or more heavier than this certainly. So different leagues with those kind of machines, but I think this, the new Cat 302, JCB's 19C, they're all at that like just 2 ton kind of range, and they're trying to kind of be a bit more than that standard 1.5 tonner, but still in that small package, and they can do it. There's no doubt that they can do it. Haven't driven the new Cat. It's a machine I'd like to try really. I know you can get aircon with them as well, which is a really nice touch, but this is going to be a lot cheaper option. I think a friend of mine pays 17 grand plus about one of these, so you know, you won't get a Cat for that money certainly. Yeah, you know, I don't think it's a bad digger. I would, with the finance options they do on them at the moment and the deals you can get, I'd certainly look at owning one. I think it's very small shortcomings you could certainly live with. And there are some great advantages, you know, factory fitting a thumb if you want that, and the 4 pipes at the end of the dipper and things like that, you know, really make this machine quite a nice, tasty, high spec sort of digger really, and something that's a lot more towable. You know, you can put this on a trailer. Doesn't matter how many buckets you've got, a breaker. You know, you're always going to be under 3.5 ton, and that's important for a lot of people. You know? So yeah, I like it. Not a bad machine by any means. I'd definitely compare it to a Cat if I could ever get to drive one of those one day when they start getting more out and about in the market. Definitely be worth having a look at as a comparison. And of course the new JCB, which I did drive at their quarry but haven't driven in anger really. That new JCB range. I think they've taken quite a lot of positives from this Bobcat design and really sort of thought things through. So anyway, yeah, they'd be the machines I compared against, and always worth taking a look at them all. Cool. Hope you enjoyed this video, and hope to catch you when I have another machine to review soon. Cheers.